Hi, this is John Wiederhorn with the MTV Headbangers Ball blog, and we're here with Thomas Warrior from Celtic Frost, and before that, Hellhammer. How's it going, Thomas?
It's going very well, very busy actually. That's very good.
Excellent. It seems like you have been very busy recently. The Hellhammer album, Demon Entrails, is about to come out, and that's a pretty exciting record. I guess it's something fans have been waiting for a while. Early demos remastered and re-released.
Yeah, for a while, 25 years to be exact. Yeah, I guess that is a while. It's probably longer than most of the fans have been on this planet. Yeah.
Why did you decide to put out that project, considering that Hellhammer really only did one EP?
The reasons are so manifold that it would take hours to explain them all, and they're all equally important. I can tell you maybe one or two reasons. One is that wherever we have traveled on this planet, we have encountered miserable, greedy bootlegs of material that we own. Wherever we went, we found bootlegs with miserable sound, with wrong song titles, wrong lyrics, wrong credits, photos that were of early Celtic Frost and simply labeled Hellhammer, just driven by greed. And after 25 years of seeing that, we simply decided maybe we should put this out the correct way. We're the only people who have all this material. We're the only people who were involved with that in 1983, and if anybody has the right to do this, it's us.
Did it bring back memories?
That's basically the second reason. For most of my life, I have shunned dealing and talking about and with my youth. I had a very difficult youth, which was the direct reason why Hellhammer even existed. Why Hellhammer, at the time when there was no extreme metal at all, why Hellhammer played extreme metal. It was an escape of mine. It was the creation of my own world to which only I had access. And when Hellhammer dissolved, I was very glad to leave it behind and just look forward and completely ignore and deny the element of my youth, because I was involved with every aspect of it. I wasn't like a fan who could only look at the music. And it took me approaching 40 years of age to finally come around and begin to deal with my youth and to be able to address certain personal issues of my youth, and of course that also led to an acceptance finally of what happened in Hellhammer.
What were some of these unpleasant experiences in your youth that drove you to create such vicious music, stuff that really predated all of the extreme metal that followed?
I am hinting at that in the forthcoming Hellhammer book, but I have been asked that in many interviews, and I'm not gonna go into great detail, because I think it's really cheap to promote a metal album on the basis of personal tragedy. That's something that Britney Spears does, or tabloids. I don't do that. The events of my youth were anything but entertaining. I had absolutely no way to change them. I was a victim of many, at times, radical circumstances, and as a child I had no means to change that. So I'm not going to promote an album on that. And for me, it was reality. Let me just simply say, it was my parents got divorced when I was 6 years old, and I grew up with a mother that literally drifted into insanity, and with all the results that caused.
Mm-hmm. So creating this band as a coping mechanism becomes a very powerful and therapeutic process, really.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. It was extremely important to me in my life to come to a point where I could analyze my youth and finally deal with it. I was married to an American woman for 16 years, and I never was able to tell her about the details of my youth. Now I have finally come to a point where I can deal with these things. As far as therapeutic is concerned, it's not quite that simple. It's not like a movie. These things will always haunt me, and they have shaped me, just like Hellhammer shaped me. If you listen to the last Celtic Frost album, Monopolist, it's extremely dark, and there's a reason to that. It's not an image, and it's not. I didn't sit on a drawing board saying, "Yeah, the next album's going to be dark." It's simply my emotions at this given time. So it was a therapy, but it's not a therapy, and you walk out healed.
Right, right. Hellhammer only lasted for that one EP. What caused the transition from Hellhammer to Celtic Frost? Because Hellhammer was certainly not a band that people were disinterested in. And Metal Blade picked you up for one of the Metal Massacre compilations, I believe, and the EP followed, and things seemed very exciting. Then suddenly it ended. Why did that come to an end?
That's not quite correct. Yeah, Metal Blade did pick us up, but in reality, when Hellhammer existed, the band was ripped apart by just about everybody, by fans, by media, by record companies. I have in 3.5 years of research for the Hellhammer book, I gathered all the press, all the fanzines from that time, and I mean, 95% of all the reviews of what Hellhammer did, demos and EP, were obliterating. The words the journalists found to destroy Hellhammer are beyond belief. The creativeness to slag us was amazing. Nobody understood what Hellhammer was doing at the time. You have to understand, AC/DC was the biggest metal band at the time. And fans were equally bewildered. The myth Hellhammer only happened when the black metal wave took place in Scandinavia in the 90s. That's when Hellhammer became what it is nowadays. But in the 80s, Hellhammer was shunned. The reason why we split up is different, though. We felt increasingly limited within that primitive musical context. We loved the heaviness, we loved the darkness, but we wanted to add much more. We wanted to add classical instruments, vocals, and so on. We felt Hellhammer, there was no room in it for that. And we got the unwelcome attention of National Socialist Satanists, which became quite dangerous at the time, and it was just too much for me and Martin. We wanted to go a different road.
Mm-hmm. The National Socialist Satanists, the Nazi skinhead Satanists?
No, it was actually Satanists who basically crossed ideologies into National Socialism, and maybe to some that sounds like a joke. It certainly wasn't at the time. There was an early heavy metal related satanic movement 10 years before the black metal wave in Scandinavia, and there were exponents of that in Switzerland, and because Hellhammer was one of the very few bands who delved in occult topics. They tried to infiltrate the band, and when that didn't work, they tried to instrumentalize the band, and to us that was quite an eye opener. We did not want to be associated with that. We wrote observant lyrics about these topics, but not following lyrics. So this really took a lot of the enthusiasm out of Hellhammer for us. It was one of many reasons that led to the dissolving of Hellhammer.
Mm-hmm. The band certainly, though, did embrace aspects of the occult and Satanism, and you continued to do so with Celtic Frost. Can I ask what your beliefs are in that realm? Is it all just visual stimulation? Is it all just kind of exciting, an exciting look, an exciting vibe, or are there real aspects of belief in the dark spirits of things?
It's never been an image, let's put it that way. I hate bands who have occult lyrics or satanic lyrics, and then you find out it's just an image to make the music sound evil. I personally don't believe in anything. I don't believe in Satan or God or any other religion. I don't believe, period. I either know or I don't, and if I don't know, I don't go around trying being missionary to people and trying to force them to believe something. And I'm perfectly happy not believing in anything.
Certainly.
Hellhammer started as a clone of Venom. We discovered Venom when we had just begun playing instruments. So the first songs we wrote were complete copies of Venom's material, including the lyrics. And of course the lyrics were satanic. Then we reached a stage where we were good enough to write our own material, which was the final month of Hellhammer. The lyrics became much more dignified, and they dealt with occultism in a much more observing manner, in a historical manner, in a researching manner and not in a satanic manner. That's really when we became our own band, and of course that kind of approach to occult topics was also followed in Celtic Frost, and you can still see that on Monopolis, our last album.
Sure. You're going to be putting out a book. Is it going to be called Only Death is Real, An Illustrated History of Hellhammer and early Celtic Frost?
Yes, it's a very extensive book. As I said, Martin and I researched for 3.5 years for that book. It's not a quick shot by any means, and it contains direct quotes from all the key members of Hellhammer. There's tons of unprecedented information in the text, and there's hundreds of rare and even unpublished photos, artwork, logos, and so on that nobody's ever seen, that we had in our own archives, that former members of Hellhammer had, and that some collectors from Japan to the United States gave us. It's going to be a large coffee table book, and it's going to be a treasure trove of amazing material. I think it's even a book that will appeal to non-Hellhammer fans because it really deals with the new wave of British heavy metal and how it led to the birth of extreme metal, of which, of course, we were one early exponent.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And when is that going to be coming out?
Hopefully still this year. We're talking to 3 publishers, 2 of which are in America. And it really depends on who we're going to go with, because all these publishers have, of course, their schedules. And I would like to see it still released this year. It might slip into 2009, but we'll do it as quickly as possible. It's in the layout right now.
Mm-hmm. And are there any plans to do any Hellhammer shows?
No.
Mm-hmm.
No, Hellhammer existed for 2 years, in 82, 83, and 84.
Mm-hmm.
And the band dissolved after 2 years, and it will remain that way. I don't do this for money. I don't want to capitalize on that. I got many lucrative offers, but there's no way I'm going to bring Hellhammer back. Hellhammer to me is something sacred, and it was the band existed at a very unique time in my life, at a very unique time in heavy metal history, and we simply cannot recreate that. If you would go on stage right now, it would be a Hollywood type of act for money, and that's exactly the opposite of what Hellhammer was all about. Hellhammer was real desperation, real pain, real darkness. It was like my life, and I'm not going to bring that back for money. That's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. The album Demon Entrails is it's funny. It's a double CD, which is probably about 5 times as much material as you ever released as Hellhammer, and the recordings are very raw.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very primitive. Of course, you cannot compare to contemporary metal. It is what it is. Hellhammer was a very basic, very primitive, very aggressive and raw band. But I'm very proud of the material. It is most of all very honest. It's not contrived, and it was a time before you could walk into a Hot Topic in every mall and within 10 minutes become a satanic metal fan. This was real. We had to create all of this. There was no internet. There was no Hot Topic stores. Every studded armband we wore, we had to manufacture ourselves. Every song we had to create ourselves. There was no million extreme metal bands that we could copy. We had to do everything ourselves. So the only inspiration was like Discharge and Venom, and from then on we went our own path.
Was there chaos and violence at the shows?
There was no shows. Hellhammer never played live.
I didn't realize that.
Nobody would give us a chance, as we talked about earlier. Nobody would give us a chance. Promoters, fans, musicians, they all laughed at us at the time. They said, "This is so heavy. This is not even music. You have to play like Dio or AC/DC." And of course, we did exactly the opposite. So nobody gave us a chance. No promoter would ever book us. So what we resorted to was basically private shows in our bunker. We practiced in a nuclear-hardened bunker underground. And we got groups of friends there and played for them. So Hellhammer only ever played these private shows in our aerosols, but never a real concert.
I remember hearing Apocalyptic Raids around the same time as I heard Voivod's War and Pain, and both of those albums really reshaped for me the whole landscape of extreme metal.
Yeah, it was a very exciting time because extreme metal was being born and being defined by a number of bands, from Slayer to Hellhammer, Celtic Frost to Voivod, and a number of other bands. And everything was basically possible. You were shaping extreme metal as you went. the extreme metal scene didn't exist as a scene; it was being born, and that spirit of revolution within the heavy metal scene was extremely inspiring, and I sometimes miss that. I'm not somebody to just delve in nostalgic stories, but that spirit it's really a shame that even extreme metal has become so commercialized nowadays, because back then it was simply a creation.
When black metal resurfaced in Norway, was that something that you found exciting? Was seeing bands like Mayhem and Emperor, Burzum, was that something that when they would cling to Hellhammer as an influence, were you proud of that, or did you feel so separated from what they were doing that it was absurd?
I know by now that I speak for several ex-Hellhammer members when I say musically we found it fantastic. Otherwise, it was extremely difficult to deal with. There was murders of homosexuals, and there were other violent acts, and very often in the reporting of such acts, the band Hellhammer was brought up as one of the early influences of these musicians that committed these things. And to be associated with all that was extremely difficult for us to deal with, and it was another reason why for so many years, a few of us had a hard time acknowledging our history in Hellhammer. The black metal movement musically is extremely exciting, and to me it still is. But these early years were quite disturbing to us all. It was almost like a lot of reporting implied a partial responsibility, and that was very difficult to come to terms with, because to me Hellhammer, as I said earlier, was a deeply personal thing, more than anything else, and to see it taken out of context and used as one of the influences for people who later go and kill and everything, that wasn't really a funny experience.
Mm-hmm. Celtic Frost, which followed in its wake, of course, was a far more influential band, a band that lasted for years and recently reunited in a very successful way. Was that a far more rewarding experience? Did you want to take advantage of the opportunities and maybe learn from the mistakes of or the conflicts that developed with Hellhammer?
Yeah, definitely. It was more rewarding in an artistic sense, because Celtic Frost knows no limits. Celtic Frost, you can do anything. It's an artist's dream, whereas Hellhammer, of course, was extremely one-dimensional. But I have to say, I mean, for me personally, both bands were equally important. My perception of extreme metal, the way I write lyrics, the way I walk in the music industry, I learned all of that in Hellhammer. It has shaped my entire life, my entire being. So I couldn't really separate one from the other, even if Celtic Frost has been together 10 times longer. It was just musically more rewarding, Celtic Frost, but Hellhammer was magic. Hellhammer was the real thing, it was magic, and Celtic Frost, of course, is an operation almost. It has existed for years, it has toured and so on, like all the other bands, whereas Hellhammer was a true underground band, an outcast band, a shunned band, where we only had the music and nothing else. There was only one thing to focus on. It was the heaviness of music.
Mm-hmm. Was it good to be embraced by the media with Celtic Frost, or did it feel like hypocrisy?
At times it felt like hypocrisy, but yeah, of course it's good. If you're an artist and you actually truly believe in your art, and you don't just do it to party or for money. If you actually really believe in your art and you work very hard to make your visions become reality, then of course it feels fantastic when the media takes note of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course. I mean, some things we did in Celtic Frost were closely related to Hellhammer, and then certain journalists who had really ripped Hellhammer apart said, yeah, now it's totally different when it really wasn't. But I mean, hypocrisy can be seen on both sides of the fence. There's plenty of musicians who are hypocrites. Maybe I'm even accused of being a hypocrite. Who knows?
Sure. Certainly, Morbid Tales, To Megatherion, Into the Pandemonium are all seminal, classic experimental metal releases, which knew no bounds and were very influential. After that, however, Cold Lake and Vanity Nemesis got a lot of flack. Was there some effort on your part to try to appeal to maybe cater to the mainstream with Cold Lake? Was that flack deserved?
No, it's simply a crap album. No, it's an illusion to think that the band that came out of the same corner as Slayer and stuff and was one of the creators of thrash metal, and that we could just like flick a switch and appeal to a commercial audience. That's quite a feeble explanation for Cold Lake. No, Cold Lake is simply a major failure of myself, of my quality standards, of my songwriting capabilities. For all intents and purposes, Celtic Frost had ceased to exist after 14 months of legal fighting against our then record company, Noise Records. At the end of 1987, at the end of the Pandemonium tour, there was simply no Celtic Frost anymore. We had burned out on every level, financially, personally, business-wise, creatively. And my mistake was to keep on being in a band when the intelligence inside of me actually told me it was over. But I tried to assemble a new band. I couldn't picture life without that. It was all I had at the time. And that was a huge mistake. No, Cold Lake is entirely my mistake. It's an abomination. There's no other word for it.
Well, why was it an abomination? Were you trying to write commercially, or were you just trying to write and the songs weren't coming out good?
First and foremost, no. I relinquished much too much control to the other musicians. I hardly wrote anything on that album, and you can hardly hear my guitar. I relinquished too much control to the producer, who really was the wrong producer. He came from commercial field and had absolutely no inclination to make it sound like Celtic Frost. I let other people write too much music. I hardly was there at the studio. I was freshly in love. I was freshly engaged, and enjoyed my time with my then fiancée, and paid way too much attention. And I'm not saying that to shift all blame to the producer and the other musicians, because at the end of the day, I was the former Celtic Frost member at the time, and I would have had the chance to stop it all, but I didn't. So even though the others had a huge influence on the album, the mistake is all mine. The responsibility is all mine. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to shift blame here.
Mm-hmm. Monotheist, which came out in 2006, was really quite a comeback and a very powerful album. I understand there's going to be a Monotheist companion album coming out this year?
Yeah, I heard that rumor too, but so far we haven't been working on anything like that. There's plenty of material because we worked for 5 years on Monotheist, and we recorded plenty of material. Later created the album that corresponded to our emotions, which of course didn't leave room for a lot of material. There's enough songs to fill maybe 1.5 albums more. Maybe at one point we will release songs that, maybe not. I don't know yet. But at this point we're not working on anything like that. So I'm writing material for the next Celtic Frost album.
Okay, and how do you think that material might differ from that of Monotheist? What are you striving to achieve with this next Celtic Frost album?
I want it to be darker and heavier because that's how I feel right now mentally. I wanted to represent myself as honestly as Monotheist did, and ever since the years we did Monotheist, I have just sunk into more darkness in my life, and I think the album will reflect that.
What's been so dark?
It might be slightly more experimental. I have a lot of very experimental material here, which is equally dark, but not just straightforward metal. So maybe it's a little more mixed than Monotheist, but other than that, I want it to be heavier.
Well, Monotheist was pretty bleak. What kinds of things have you experienced that have made you go to even a darker place?
There again, there were plenty of things that happened between 1999 and 2005 that changed my life radically. In a nutshell, I lost everything that meant anything to me, from my life to my father to my dogs to my money to my career with my industrial project, the Points, and so on. There's many more things, but there again, we strive into Britney Spears territory, and I'd rather leave that to others to promote their work with that.
Okay, no, that's fair enough.
It's not against you, but my tragedies are real, but by using them in the context of talking about my albums have a reason that they sound like that, but I really don't want to promote them on the basis that that's pathetic.
Sure. you might
can only do that if you don't have a life, you know.
When do you think you might be done writing the material for the next album, and when can we expect to see that?
That's very difficult to say because I'm just one of 3 people in the band, and it's very complex and very difficult to work with Celtic Frost. We are 3 very volatile characters. There's a lot of creativity, which, of course, at the same time fuels a lot of dispute. It's a healthy process, but it's a very difficult process, and I certainly don't want to work for 5 years like we did in Monopolist. So I genuinely hope we can release the next album next year, but it's anybody's guess when it actually happens.
Mm-hmm. And you did a fair amount of touring for Monotheist, right? Some of the shows were fantastic.
We did the longest tour Celtic Frost ever undertook. We played 125 shows, basically in every country on this planet, in the Western Hemisphere and also in Asia. The reactions were amazing. When we came back after 16 years and released, we didn't just tour on the strength of all these new goodies, but actually released a new album and re-entered the competitive heavy metal scene. We had no idea how this would go down. We were prepared to take the full risks because we wanted to remain creative and not just relax on things achieved in the past. So we went out expecting anything, and what happened was that the tour was fantastic, and I will remain grateful for that the rest of my life. This tour has been one of the high points of my life.
What about the current heavy metal scene now? Do you look out and see a lot of uninspired crap that's really media-driven and catering to the labels and the scenes that are going on at the moment, or do you see any stuff that's really, really kind of lighting your fire?
Unfortunately, it's more of the first. I would say the great massive metal scene is as per your first description. There's always fantastic bands out there, but unfortunately, it's only a handful. It takes much more guts to risk your career with every new album than to just play it safe and play what everybody else is playing, or even copy the next band. Then you never run a risk. On the other hand, you're basically hurting your own music. But having said that, you asked me about the current metal scene, but the description I just gave basically applies to the metal scene in the 80s as well, and in the 90s too. The drastic thing that I see now that I'm on tour in current times is that it hasn't really changed from the 80s. There's an internet, but that's pretty much the only change. We could have talked about the same things in the 80s. I guess it's people who don't change.